What if the thoughts you cultivate today are literally building the biological infrastructure that will determine your health, cognitive abilities, and emotional resilience for decades to come? Let me share Sarah's story. After struggling with anxiety for years, she committed to daily thought redirection practices. The first month was challenging, she recalls. But after 6 weeks, my colleagues noticed I was responding differently to workplace stress. By month 3, my brain had literally rewired itself. The situations that once triggered panic now felt manageable. Sarah's experience mirrors what neuroscience reveals about mental gardening. Consistent practice creates observable changes in brain structure and function. Most people approach positive thinking as a pleasant psychological exercise that might temporarily improve mood, but has little substantive impact. This perspective misses the profound biological reality. Your thoughts physically restructure your brain with every mental gardening session. Research from the University of Wisconsin's Center for Healthy Minds demonstrates that consistent thought pattern redirection creates measurable changes in neural density in as little as 8 weeks. These represent fundamental rewiring of your neurological architecture. When you consistently prune negative thought patterns, you physically alter how your brain processes information. Studies conducted at UCLA revealed that participants who practiced daily thought redirection for 12 weeks showed 21% decrease in amygdala reactivity, the brain's threat detection center, increased activation in the prefrontal cortex, executive function center. This shift represents a neurological power transfer from your reactive emotional centers to your thoughtful planning centers. Your brain redistributes its resources based on which networks you consistently activate. The timeline of these benefits follows a predictable pattern. Immediate benefits, within minutes, normalized heart rate, decreased muscle tension, more regular breathing patterns. These immediate rewards provide valuable reinforcement during early practice stages. The simple act of redirecting attention from negative rumination to positive alternatives creates an almost instantaneous shift in emotional state. Intermediate benefits, days to weeks, improved sleep quality, 27% improvement in sleep efficiency according to sleep medicine reviews, increased attention span, a greater emotional stability. These improvements create a positive feedback loop. Better sleep enhances cognitive function, making thought redirection easier the following day. Long-term benefits, months to years, increased gray matter density in regions associated with attention and compassion, improved immune function with lower inflammatory markers, enhanced production of natural killer cells, reduced blood pressure and arterial inflammation. A longitudinal study tracking practitioners over 2 years found these structural brain changes correlated with measurable improvements in physical health. Participants showed significantly lower levels of inflammatory markers compared to control groups. The findings align with groundbreaking research from psychoneuroimmunology, revealing direct pathways connecting thought patterns to physical health. When you consistently cultivate positive thought patterns, you modulate your entire inflammatory response system. Harvard Medical School research found these cardiovascular benefits occurred independent of other lifestyle factors, suggesting the direct physiological impact of thought patterns on heart function. What makes these findings particularly remarkable is their compounding nature. Each day of mental gardening multiplies your progress. Neuroscientists call this self-reinforcing neural plasticity. New neural pathways become progressively easier to activate with consistent use. Your initial efforts might require significant conscious attention, but over time, these redirected thought patterns become your brain's default operation mode. This neurological compounding extends beyond brain structure to influence virtually every domain of life. Improved relationship quality, 34% greater cognitive flexibility when approaching challenges, enhanced financial decision-making and long-term planning. Stanford University researchers discovered that the benefits follow a non-linear trajectory. The most substantial improvements often occurred after participants moved beyond the initial enthusiasm phase and continued practicing through periods of doubt. This suggests that persisting when practice feels most challenging yields the greatest neurological dividends. Understanding this reality transforms how you approach daily mental gardening. You're actively constructing your future neurological architecture. Each time you interrupt a negative thought spiral and redirect to a positive alternative, you physically strengthen neural pathways that eventually become automatic. The neurological harvest of consistent mental gardening reveals itself most clearly in how your brain processes challenging situations. After months of practice, your amygdala becomes less reactive to potential threats, your prefrontal cortex activates more readily, and new neural pathways form that make positive interpretations increasingly automatic rather than requiring conscious effort. This transformation represents a fundamental shift in your neurological default settings, from threat detection and negative bias to opportunity recognition and balanced perspective. The long-term practitioner doesn't need to constantly monitor their thoughts because their brain has been physically restructured to naturally generate more constructive interpretations of experience. The changing seasons, adapting your mental gardening through life's challenges. While that balanced perspective you've cultivated might seem robust, what happens when life delivers an unexpected emotional storm? Your mental garden, like any physical landscape, must weather changing seasons and unpredictable challenges that test even the most diligent gardener's resolve. Just as gardens face droughts, floods, and harsh winters, our minds encounter periods of grief, burnout, and major transitions. Research from the University of Cambridge reveals that 78% of people abandon their mental well-being practices during precisely the periods when they need them most. This creates a vulnerability cycle where our mental defenses collapse exactly when facing our greatest challenges. Different emotional seasons require fundamentally different approaches. Dr. Lucy Hone, a resilience researcher who experienced the tragic loss of her daughter, discovered that grief demands a unique form of mental cultivation. Her research at the New Zealand Institute of Wellbeing and Resilience shows that during grief, traditional positivity practices can increase suffering, while selective attention toward meaningful connections provides genuine sustenance. During grief, your mental garden requires protective conservation of emotional resources rather than forced growth. Anxiety, however, responds differently. University of Pennsylvania psychologist Dr. Martin Seligman found that cognitive challenging techniques produce better results than either distraction or emotional processing alone. Meanwhile, burnout responds most effectively to what researchers at the Karolinska Institute call attentional restoration, deliberate exposure to environments requiring minimal directed attention while activating involuntary attention through natural settings. This variation explains why one-size-fits-all mental practices often fail during life transitions. A study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology tracked participants through major life changes and found that those who adapted their mental practices showed remarkable resilience, while those rigidly maintaining identical practices experienced significantly higher distress. Consider Maria, a therapist who thrived on daily meditation and journaling until her father's unexpected illness. When these practices suddenly felt overwhelming, she switched to brief breath awareness exercises during hospital visits and voice-recorded reflections during her commute. By adapting rather than abandoning her mental gardening, she maintained emotional stability during a difficult season. The key psychological trait underpinning this adaptability is what Dr. Stephen Hayes calls psychological flexibility, the ability to contact the present moment while adjusting behaviors to serve valued ends. Research from his team at the University of Nevada found that this flexibility predicts mental health outcomes better than almost any other psychological variable, accounting for over 40% of the variance in psychological well-being during challenging periods. So how do you create contingency plans for different mental seasons? Start by developing if-then implementations for various emotional weather patterns. When experiencing crisis, implement an intensive care protocol that prioritizes protective structures over growth. This means simplifying your mental garden through focused attention on only the most essential elements, basic self-care, connection with key supporters, and temporary acceptance of reduced cognitive capacity. Dr. Shauna Shapiro at Santa Clara University found that crisis periods require radical self-compassion, the deliberate suspension of growth expectations in favor of basic psychological safety. Her research shows that participants who practiced this approach during acute stress recovered more quickly and retained more previous progress than those attempting to maintain their full practice regimen. For busy periods when time constraints threaten consistency, Dr. B.J. Fogg's research at Stanford University demonstrates that maintaining minimal viable practices, tiny habits, preserves neural pathways far more effectively than temporarily abandoning practices altogether. Even 60-second versions of key mental techniques maintain enough continuity to prevent complete regression. During periods of stability and strength, this becomes the optimal time to expand your mental garden through deliberate exploration of new thought patterns. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory demonstrates that positive emotional states create ideal conditions for experimenting with new mental approaches that may serve you during future challenging periods. The most resilient mental gardeners develop what University of Michigan researcher Dr. Jane Dutton calls psychological emergency kits, pre-prepared interventions for moments when rational thinking becomes compromised. These kits contain simple, accessible practices implementable even when cognitive resources are severely depleted. Healthcare workers who prepared such kits showed 43% greater emotional stability during crisis events compared to those formulating responses in the moment. These emergency techniques include Dr. Andrew Huberman's physiological size, specifically patterned double inhale breathing that rapidly deactivates stress responses at the autonomic level. This technique directly engages the vagus nerve, creating immediate downregulation of the sympathetic nervous system before cognitive interventions become possible. Protection of your mental garden during emotional storms also requires psychological pre-mortem planning, anticipating potential derailments before they occur. Dr. Gary Klein's research demonstrates that mentally rehearsing specific challenges creates neural preparedness that dramatically improves real-world implementation. This adaptation capacity transforms mental gardening from a temporary project into a sustainable lifetime practice. The Harvard study of adult development found that participants demonstrating this adaptability maintained stable psychological health despite facing similar challenges as peers who experienced significant deterioration during difficult periods. When you inevitably face setbacks, approach them with curiosity rather than judgment. Dr. Carol Dweck's work shows that viewing setbacks as informational feedback creates dramatically different neurological responses than seeing them as personal failures. Participants who responded to mental gardening setbacks with flexible adaptation showed 67% greater recovery rates and ultimately developed more sophisticated approaches. The most powerful approach combines self-distanced analysis, examining setbacks from a third-person perspective, with immediate recommitment to adjusted practices. This technique creates the optimal condition for extracting useful information from failures without becoming entangled in self-criticism.